Am I the jerk for telling my parents to kick out my housemate's married, immigrant Indian boyfriend? Since I have a chronic health condition with high medical expenses and am in graduate school, I am living with my parents in the family home I grew up in. My parents are renting out a room downstairs to a woman who I have become friends with. Last year, she started dating a married, supposedly separated Indian man who illegally crossed the border to the USA, apparently as a political refugee, and is working on his green card. A few weeks into their dating, he tattooed her name on his chest and showered her with gifts. Shortly after that, he had a mental breakdown as he is bipolar, moving out of his apartment and quitting his job. My housemate was worried about him becoming homeless, so she spent thousands of dollars renting an Airbnb for them to live together while also paying rent. My mother felt guilty that my housemate was spending so much, so she offered to have her boyfriend, who was very charming to my mom, live with us for a short transitional period, a few weeks while he looked for housing. That few weeks turned into 9 months. My parents increased the rent slightly for him to stay due to the additional cost of utilities, water, and wear and tear on the house, and we thought he and my housemate split rent together. My housemate recently had several emotional and financial-related mental breakdowns, leading her to seek an intensive psychiatric day program, and confided in me that she is paying for everything, both their rent, groceries, and even his phone bills. Also, she is spending all her spare time arranging his doctor's appointments, writing his resume, and more. Despite her boyfriend working 2 jobs, he says he is broke and is spending all his money paying off his debts, sending all his money to India, and even financing his siblings' weddings, which he says cost more than $100,000. He owns a $40,000 car and wears his $7,000 gold chain and his wedding band around his neck, which I find disgusting. Despite that, he says he is broke and would be homeless without her. He acts charming, generous, and respectful to us, but the facts around his situation concern me, and I think he is scamming and exploiting her. He calls us all his family, calls me sister, and calls my partner and fiancé brother. He acts as if we are all one big family, which feels very uncomfortable and forced. He bows down and sweeps my mother's feet to show respect to elders, which she finds extremely charming, but it feels awkward, sycophantic, and disingenuous to me. He also pretends like he is not married and does not have a daughter. We know because my housemate told us, but he thinks we do not know. After learning that he is exploiting the generosity of my mentally unstable housemate, I do not like him and want him to leave our home. My mother likes him since he acts charming to her and feels sorry for him because he has had a hard life and is lonely since his family is back in India. Am I the asshole for telling my parents and housemate that we need to get rid of this guy? I think you are not in the wrong here. This guy seems to be taking advantage of your housemate and your mother, which is typical of how grifters operate. It's very likely he's not actually separated, and his family back in India has no idea about this situation. While it's understandable to want him gone, you don't really have the standing to demand it. Moving out might be the best option if they continue to be in denial about his true intentions. Am I the jerk? I asked my neighbor to have her son turn his house music down at midnight, and she slammed the door in our faces. For context, our neighbor is an older woman who lives alone. Her son, who is in his mid-40s, lived with her for a while, moved out to his older sister's place, but frequently comes over and spends the night at his mother's. His bedroom window is directly across from mine, and he loves house music, which is great, because so do I. However, he has a habit of blasting his music during the late night hours, typically between 11:00 p.m. and 1:00 a.m. Tonight it's 11:00 p.m., and he starts playing house music. I have my window open because it's midsummer, and it gets sickeningly hot here at night. He has his window open too, so the music is blaring directly into my room. Fortunately, he has good taste in music, but unfortunately I wake up at 6:00 a.m. for work. We let it play until midnight, and sure enough, he's still going hard. I'm talking 15-minute long 7 Nation Army remix hard. It ends up getting louder, at which point we decide to go next door to request that he either turn it down a bit or close his window. We had no intent of asking him to shut it off, just to turn it down or close the window so that every lyric and instrument isn't audible in my room. We go next door, knock, and his mom answers. At first, she doesn't even open the door. She just looks at us through the side window and goes, "What?" We calmly and politely request that she have her son turn the music down or shut his window as we are trying to sleep in preparation for the Monday workday. She then opens the door and, before we can explain any further, shouts, "He's hardly here, so it's not like it's happening all the time. So please don't complain." I try to explain we aren't there to chastise them, but before I can finish, she says, "Well, that's just too bad," and proceeds to slam the door in our faces. We go back to the house and I'm honestly flabbergasted. We usually get along fine with them both. I was just in the yard chatting with her for an hour about our local mourning dove population, not even a month ago. I used to bring her son fruit from our yard when the season was on. Everything was normal. So where this hostility came from, I have no idea. So what gives? Am I the asshole? Were we being totally unreasonable? It feels bad considering we've gotten along well as neighbors in all the years we've lived beside one another. Nothing you have done here makes me think you are the jerk. The guy blasting music into the early hours on a workday and the person enabling it are the real problems here. If politely asking them to keep it down doesn't work, file a noise complaint. Sometimes it's necessary to escalate things to the authorities to get some peace and quiet. Am I the jerk for not paying more rent like my sibling asked? I am currently living with my sister, who has 6 children, her husband and my father. The house is under my father's name, but essentially they pay the rent, and my father pays his portion. I do not live with my mother because she is abusive, and I am about to graduate from college. I have a job lined up and have been saving to buy my own house. My sister and I have been arguing over what is a fair amount for me to pay for rent. She wants me to pay 30% of the total expenses, and I think it is unfair considering her children use a lot of the expenses. I do not have a room. I sleep on the couch in the living room, and I am not there most days. I work from home for 2 days, and the other days I am either at work or school, and sometimes sleep over at friends' houses. I buy my own food and personal items. I try to help out and pay for expenses like basic food, for example, water and bread, and common essentials for food. She pays for toilet paper since her children tend to waste it a lot. I try not to be in the household too long to give them personal space. I have helped her since I was very young by babysitting and even taking care of everything in the house for months after each labor. I have washed her and her children's clothes, cooked and babysat during those times. I just do not think it is fair for me to pay that large percentage of every bill when I am not there and do not even have a proper room. She always reminds me that I have to put up with whatever she and her children do to me just because I live under her roof. I do try to put up with it. Her children touch my things all the time, and I can barely wash because they always occupy the washer and dryer. I buy and cook my food and just buy more if they eat what is mine. My father and I also help her by dropping off her children at school and taking them to church functions. If they need help with repairs in the household, I help pay expenses. I understand I am not in a situation to complain, but I am saving up to get out as soon as I can and have a job lined up in a couple of months once I graduate. I just really do not know if I am being unreasonable, like my sister says I am. If I am, how much would be fair to split it with 4 adults and 6 children? Am I the asshole for not wanting to pay that much for a couch? There are 10 people living in this house, so why should you pay more than 10% of the costs? It sounds like your sister is trying to bully you into subsidizing her children, which you're under no moral obligation to do. Given that you're getting no preferential treatment, I see no reason why you should pay 30% of the total household expenses. Talk to your dad and let him know you'll pay 10% until you can find a place of your own. Am I the jerk for not giving my half-siblings anything after they were left out of the will? My father divorced his first wife after she had a baby that was not his. He had 5 legitimate children with her but did not fight for custody. A few years later, he met my mother, had me, and we had a happy life for 53 years. I may have seen my half-siblings less than a dozen times in my whole life, mostly when I was much younger. My father tried to help them out over the years, giving advice and lending them money when they needed it. We never lived in the same state, but I would hear of them from time to time, always through my father's disappointment in them. He also felt some guilt for not being there for them. Eventually, they broke his trust one too many times, and he decided to never help them out financially again. They would occasionally call or send a birthday card, but they all eventually stopped calling. About a year ago, my mother passed away suddenly, and then my father pretty much lost the will to live and passed away about 9 months later. Being the only child, it was a huge emotional burden for me, not to mention a logistical nightmare, but I loved them and I was happy to be able to be there for them. My half-sister came out of the woodwork and began visiting my father at his assisted living facility, and I was appreciative of any help, even if it was a couple of weeks here and there. Aside from her, no one else came to visit. After he passed, I learned through his will that I was the sole inheritor of his humble estate. It was actually supposed to go to my mother and then to me if she was no longer living, but since she had already passed, it all went to me. His other children were not mentioned in the will. About 2 months later, as I was trying to deal with probate, I got a call from one of the siblings saying they were going to challenge the will in court and sue me if they did not get their fair share. They claimed that my father had promised them things over the years. I told them that while I knew it hurt not to be mentioned in the will, there was nothing I could do about it. I did not write the will. One of them even suggested that I influenced him while he had dementia. I tried to be understanding, knowing that they lost their father too, but this went on for months. At one point, just to push things along, I said that I would think about sending them some things, but I needed to get through probate first. They finally relented once they realized they had no case. I am finally through probate, but they have left such a bad taste in my mouth that I do not want to give them anything. I would rather just donate the items they wanted. They do not even want the items because they mean anything to them. It is things they think they can sell for money. So, am I the asshole if I do not give them anything? You are not the jerk for your specific question, but it's clear that your dad was the jerk here. He straight up abandoned 5 children to start a new family, which is incredibly hurtful to them. They grew up knowing they had a father who didn't fight to be a part of their lives and viewed them as disappointments. While it's understandable that you're following your father's will, it's worth considering how his actions left his older children feeling abandoned and hurt. Am I the jerk for ditching my friend on prom night? School dances have never been my thing, so I spent a long time debating whether I wanted to go to my senior prom. I ultimately decided to go because my boyfriend is homeschooled, and I can tell he feels like he is missing out on having a normal high school experience. I figured taking him to prom would be a nice gesture. Unfortunately, I didn't make up my mind until 2 weeks before prom, which meant we didn't have a lot of time to make plans. I knew my best friend was already planning to go to prom with some of her other friends, so the next week at school, I asked if my boyfriend and I could tag along with her group. She said it was fine. A couple of days later, my boyfriend started asking me about dinner plans. When I asked my friend about it, I found out that she didn't have any plans for dinner, dessert, or anything at all. I asked her if she had any food preferences, and she said she didn't care where we went. Then I asked the other girls in her group where they wanted to go, and they didn't have any ideas either. Finally, I asked my boyfriend where he wanted to go, and he too had no ideas. So I decided to bite the bullet and pick the place myself. There was also the issue of transportation. My mom offered to drive us to the restaurant and then the dance afterward, but she said that everyone needed to find their own transportation to our house first, so that she didn't have to drive around and pick everyone up. The day before the dance, my friend approached me and told me she wanted to coordinate outfit colors and that we were all going to wear black. I said that wouldn't be possible because the dress I had chosen was blue. She asked if she could see a picture, and when I showed her the one I had, she held back a laugh and said, "You seriously want to wear a Walmart dress?" I told her that I liked the dress just fine, and besides, my boyfriend had already picked out a matching tuxedo. Then she said she didn't think it was fair that I wasn't giving her any input. I told her that I would have appreciated her input if she had given it earlier when I expressly asked for it. Since her phone was broken and I couldn't contact her via text, I told her that I would email her the schedule. I sent the email first thing the next morning and explained that she needed to be at my house around 5:30. She didn't respond, so I tried texting the other girls in our group, but they didn't respond either. Finally, I tried calling her mom but got no response. Throughout the day, I tried several more times to contact her, but I was met with radio silence. When 5:30 rolled around, I still hadn't heard anything from anyone other than my boyfriend. Not wanting to miss out on prom night, I finally decided to just ditch the rest of the group and take my boyfriend to dinner. My friend made it to the dance on her own, but she was upset that I left her behind. Am I the asshole? You are not to blame. You made multiple reasonable attempts to communicate the schedule to everyone, and unfortunately, they didn't pick up on it. She could have easily reached out beforehand to confirm the plans with you. Also, a friend who makes fun of you for wearing a dress from Walmart isn't really a friend. Am I the jerk for not giving my parent my coworkers' cookies? Hi, I, 19-year-old female, went to the beach with a group of my coworkers 2 days ago. Half of the group went to Target before heading over to the beach. We bought snacks, everyone purchasing their own desired items. Some of us even bought larger sizes to have extra at home. Later in the day, we started cleaning up our beach setup. We put everyone's food in separate bags and placed them in the trunk of the car, then went off to do other activities in the area. One of my coworkers and his girlfriend left early because she had to work at 5 in the morning. Later, we all decided to go home. Once we arrived back at my coworker's house, we started cleaning out her car. We realized that my coworker who left early with his girlfriend had left his bag of snacks in our car. Since I was scheduled to work with him the next day, I volunteered to take it with me and give it to him tomorrow. Once I arrived home around midnight, I left the bag on my kitchen counter off to the side so I would not forget it the following day. The next morning, my dad had already left for work, and my mom was in her room. I greeted her and showed her pictures of the beach. She asked me to make her a coffee, and I said yes and headed out of the room. Before I could walk out, she said, "Oh, I saw that in the Target bag you bought some Madeleines, but your dad said you probably bought them for your friends." I responded, "Sorry, Mom, but I didn't buy them at all. My coworker left it in the car yesterday and I was going to give it to him today." She understood, and I proceeded to tell her I did buy other snacks if she wanted any, but she declined. I made her coffee, and that was the end of that conversation. Today, my parents and I were getting ready to go to an event at my church. I was downstairs with my dad, and my mom was still getting dressed. My dad said to me, "By the way, your mom said she saw some Madeleines in that Target bag earlier yesterday, and you said they were your friends, and she was sad the rest of the day. Next time, just give them to her." I tried to tell him that was not exactly what happened, but he interrupted me and started telling me that it was my coworker's fault for leaving them, and that I shouldn't even have brought them into the house. I started to get upset and told my dad it wasn't my fault she got sad about the cookies, and I was going to buy her a box next time I went to the store. He continued bickering as I left the room. Am I the asshole? You acted correctly. If your dad thought your mom was sad about the cookies, he could have gone and bought some for her. It's ridiculous for a grown woman to act like a brat over cookies that weren't even hers. And your dad enabling this behavior just makes the whole situation more pathetic. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.